Hey, everybody, welcome to the Real Late Show with Chris and Craig. Craig will be here shortly, but we got a guest tonight. I want to introduce and start to talk to him about what he does. Neil Schwartz, he's the president of SBR Net, a lot of sports analytics, kind of looking at the business side and other things. I love sports, but I love the kind of behind the scenes and business and everything. So it's fantastic to have him on, talk a little bit about what he does. How's it going, Neil?
It's going great. It's been a good day. Anytime I can talk about sports, all day long. How bad can it be? I mean, how bad can it be, really?
Well, nice job. You get a job like that, you're great. Well, tell me a little bit about SBR Net.
Sure. SBR Net stands for Sports Business Research Network, and what we do is we are focused on the business side of sports. So we don't do anything when it comes to on-field performance or, I couldn't tell you the best five guys to put out there in a tie game situation in a basketball game. But, what I do is I help teams, leagues, brands, advertising agencies really understand their fans and their preferences, their habits, their behaviors, and then how to leverage that data in order to grow revenue or, accomplish other strategic objectives. So again, we're data providers. We focus on what we call sports fandom data. What goes, and there's so much that goes into sports fandom. It's not just, hey, I root for this team. You root for them. Are you buying licensed merchandise? Are you gambling? Are you watching, them on streaming versus traditional TV? Do you travel to support your team? I know you guys are, I guess, in the Midwest. I know, Chris, I remember you talking about Columbus. Ohio State fans are among the best traveling college football fans in the country. And I have that data that proves it. But there's other teams that travel real well also. Michigan, Notre Dame, University of Florida fans. West Virginia travels really well, and a number of other schools. But again, we are focused specifically on the business side of sports. What's interesting also is that we sell a lot of data into colleges and universities. They use the data as a teaching tool. So that students, when they come out of school, are now understand how to use data, how to use analytics. And with our data, it's live. It's not like it's old data. It's all fresh. It's all brand new. So they really have an opportunity to kind of work and understand more in the real world. Hey, Craig, how are you?
Good. How are you, Neil?
I'm doing great.
Craig is with us from Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
Craig writes for the Nashville paper, the big paper down there. So, Craig is very interested in what you have to say, too. Neil, what teams do you work with? Do you work with, particular teams or particular?
Well, most of the teams I work with, I'm actually under NDA. I do work with a number of smaller – I work with a lot of the leagues that are kind of up and coming. I do work with a couple of the women's women's soccer leagues. Also, I've done some work with the professional women's ice hockey. So I do tend to work with those leagues that are really trying to help themselves get established. I've done some other work. Actually done some work with the Kansas City Chiefs and Pepsi and people like that. So there's a number of things, and a lot of the things I do are under NDA, and I have to kind of be careful sometimes.
Yeah, it makes sense. What's the hardest thing? Because I've sat in board meetings of new teams. What's the hardest thing for getting a league going? I mean, it's exciting to see the women's volleyball. Yeah. I know in Columbus we have that too.
Yes.
But the tough thing about that is sometimes you look at it and say, when you start from scratch, where do you start? And unfortunately, sometimes these leagues don't work out. So what's the challenge for you if you're giving advice to a league like that?
Yeah, there is actually a league I was working with, actually as a men's indoor soccer league. I don't want to necessarily mention it, but, they were having a tough time. Number one, I think, is that they had a tough time because I think they really didn't understand kind of their niche and where they really fit and kind of the, everything. I mean, right now, look, there's so many networks out there, so many streaming networks, and there's a lot of programming time that needs to be filled. But, they may have overshot. They went for Amazon, they went for Apple TV, they went for a couple of the big guys, and we advised them not to do that. We advised them to look at people like Tubi and a couple of the other smaller streaming networks that really need to fill up a lot of programming. But I think first and foremost, you've got to really kind of pull back a little bit, and you've got to really spend some time to understand who is your target customer, who is your target fan. If you're on women's sports, is your target fan necessarily women? The interesting thing is, if you look at the WNBA, and I have an extensive amount of data on the WNBA, but there are actually more male fans of the WNBA than there are female fans. And I remember sitting in a meeting, in fact, with a WNBA team, and the guy kind of rolled his eyes at me. And I'm like, why are you rolling your eyes? I said, here's the reality. There are just more male sports fans. Hard stop. Just more male sports fans. So if there are more male sports fans, even if you're 50-50 or 50-45, whatever it might, there's still going to be more out there because there's just more male sports fans. And, and then, we went into, some of the little idiosyncrasies about streaming and live attendance and watching traditional TV, cable, satellite versus streaming. So, there's a number of, let's say, idiosyncrasies or things that are going on right now. But I think the biggest thing, Chris and Craig, and this, by the way, is true for any new product launch, understand your niche, understand where you fit, understand where you go, and then understand your fans. Who are they? Who are you going after? Are you trying to create new fans, or are you trying to go after fans of another team? What are you trying to accomplish? And then, from there, you can set yourself off in a specific strategy to help guide you.
For me, maybe as a journalist, I'm cheap. I mean, journalists don't make a ton of money, so we're all cheap. But sometimes, like, after you're used to getting press passes to go in the game,
sure,
you'll look at, like up here, like going to a Buckeye game, and you're like, oh, $80, wow, that's a lot of money. And even though it's a great experience, sometimes the cost scares you off. What do you tell like a new team in terms of how to set prices? Because you can't let them charge $1, but then if they charge $30, $40, $50, people are like, what the heck? Why am I doing this?
And then a lot gets back to your customer. If you want to attract families, then you want to set your pricing accordingly. If you're the NFL is not a family league. The NFL is a corporate league. If you look at it, you talk to people, that are sitting in the lower bowl, the cheaper seats, not cheaper seats, the more expensive seats, in the luxury boxes, in the club seats, and all those other things. The NFL has become a corporate league. In fact, when you look at the face value on most NFL games, it's, some of the face value tickets are just ridiculously high. So what you've got to do again is that, if you want to bring in families, and the WNBA, by the way, has been good at this. The WNBA understands, their market, and they want to bring in families. They also want to attract younger fans. Younger fans don't have the disposable income that older fans do. Look, I'm a old guy baby boomer. I make more than, although I shouldn't say that. My millennial daughter makes more than me. But for the most part, younger fans don't have the same disposable income. So again, it's really all about understanding your market and then understand how to bring them in. Look, if you're going to charge exorbitant prices, for a WNBA game, you might be pleasantly surprised.
One thing I was interested in, in all of this research and analytics, the UFL, obviously there seems to be an appetite for pro football, but
yes,
the UFL seems to be in this disconnect where they don't get a lot of fans. They did secure a pretty decent television rights contract, but when you watch their games, no one's really there.
Right.
Ratings wise, I think they've been okay, but what's sort of the disconnect with the UFL Spring League not being able to attract a wider fan base in the seats?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, one of the things I think that people think about the NFL is that they've done such an unbelievable job of carpet bombing, American football fans, with games. I mean, it's, almost 5 nights a week now. You've got Thursday, Saturday in some cases, Sunday, Monday. Am I running out of days here? Sunday night. They really carpet bomb their fans with opportunities to watch football.
Yeah.
And personally, I am a football fan, so I do watch a lot. My wife hates it, but oh well. Can't win them all. But again, they've done an amazing job. I do think you reach a point of saturation. Look, the NFL does a lot of things right. I mean, they are the granddaddy of all. I mean, they are literally America's sport. I mean, it's America's pastime. They have over 172 million fans here in the United States. And those are just based on persons 13 years and older. They've probably got a lot of fans below the age of 13 too. But we only measure sports fans starting at age 13. So they've got 172 million fans, which makes them far and away the number one sports attraction. I will tell you, though, they're necessarily not growing as fast as some other sports as I look at my chart down here. Interesting thing, the WNBA, a lot less fans, a much smaller base, but they are growing at a much faster pace, whether it's in live attendance, streaming, or or traditional viewing. So, again, it's very hard. In my opinion, football would be one of the hardest sports to, introduce a new league. That's why, look, indoor football, I thought it was fun to watch, but, again, just didn't draw,
Right.
in some cases didn't draw flies. Because again, the NFL does such an unbelievable job of carpet bombing us football fans with programming. They really do.
Right.
And I think, you reach a certain point. And I also think that other times of the year, Major League Baseball wants to share of audience and share of time.
Right.
Craig, one of the things I like to talk about, I've been in the research business over 25 years, actually 30 years, 25 in sports. But one of the terms that I have, I don't think I have necessarily coined this, but right now as consumers, and we're all consumers, by the way, because we all consume,
Right.
but we're very time impoverished. We just don't have the kind of time. If you have children, whatever it is, we're very time impoverished. There are more two-person family, and I always kind of mix up my words here, but there are more families where both parents or both people are working than ever before, because you needed to make ends meet. Right. So, it makes us for very time impoverished. We don't have the kind of time necessarily to put in, I hate to say it, watching a lot of live sports. So, we've got to compartmentalize a little bit. We've got to pick and choose. But I also tell you that situation has also been great for streaming and really good for YouTube. Really good for YouTube.
What, the UFL?
No, just in general. Fact that consumers, much more compartmentalized, time impoverished. When you can watch a whole game in 15, 20 minutes, that, it's hard to sometimes it's hard to sit down and watch a game 2.5 hours, 3 hours in some cases. I find that particularly difficult for me for baseball. But again, it's kind of, they kind of have something for everybody. But, the spring football just hasn't caught on, I think, the way that they would like it to have, or because we're saturated.
And see, to me, and there's got to be some reason why they don't do that. Why can't the UFL become kind of like a minor league or a feeder league for some of these NFL teams? So you take your favorite NFL team, and instead of just some random UFL team where maybe there's 2 or 3 guys that once played in the NFL for a game or two, have it like, think here in Ohio. I'm not a Browns fan, but
I get it.
Like Columbus, we're having a new UFL team in the spring. I'm sitting here like, why would anyone go to that game? But we're halfway in between Cleveland and Cincinnati, so make it a Browns feeder team, or make it a Bengals feeder team, or whatever,
Well, there is already a feeder team, Chris. It's called college football.
I know.
Ohio State is the pro team, really.
You're putting something in there that doesn't really need to be there. Right. But you know what? I'm going to tell you another quick story or anecdote. I did some work for a group called the A7FL. It was a 7-on-7 tackle football league, no equipment. I mean, most of these guys are former NFL guys, retired, guys who didn't make their teams, whatever reason. And so what they did was they had an interesting strategy where the A7FL decided we were going to create these like football clusters, and we were going to put our teams in cluster in certain markets around the country based on where had the highest highest amount of football fans or highest penetration of football fans where there were no NFL teams. So they went and looked at, and they used my data, by the way, to do this, is that they were able to look on a city-by-city basis and kind of overlay the cities, and they look for the cities that had the highest level of Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's nothing out there.
Right.
So, they thought about a cluster around that Albuquerque, New Mexico area. Orlando, Florida. Now, Florida does have a lot of football, let's face it. Jags up north, Tampa Bay in the middle, Miami Dolphins down south. The state's pretty well covered. But, again, there are a number of areas around the country that, have a high propensity or high likelihood of being football fans where they put their leagues. It takes a little bit more than just where to put the teams, but it was a start, and it was a good strategy, I might add.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, we were talking some football, so let me throw some football questions by you.
Okay.
I hate to out you here, but you told me you're a Dolphins fan. What's up with the Dolphins this year, man?
I don't know. I really don't know. I just think that I think the Dolphins made a mistake a number of years ago when they drafted Tua. He was not the guy. And as you're seeing, he's not. Look, he had a great arm. There's no question about it. But you know what? Anybody can be good at Alabama because you're playing behind 5 future NFL first-round draft choices. Guess what? You're playing behind the best of the best. You're not going to have that opportunity playing for the Dolphins. So, he's not a guy that can make a lot of plays with his legs. He's not a guy that, and all that. And I think I think football all starts down the middle. Quarterback, linebacker kind of play, safety kind of play down the middle. And the other problem is, and I'm not a doctor, okay? I'm going to say that right now. I do think Tua maybe have taken, more hits to the head, than maybe he would have liked. And sometimes, look, again, I'm not a doctor, but, I see him throw some of these interceptions and I'm thinking to myself, what was he thinking? Did he have like a temporary lapse there? Because, he just throws the ball sometimes right to the other. I don't know. The Dolphins are a mess right now. Hey, we can talk about the Florida Panthers, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, how about that? You guys are now a hockey state. That's got to be exciting.
Go figure, huh? South Florida. How about Florida in general? I mean, between Tampa Bay Lightning and the Panthers, you're looking at, I think, 4 of the last 5 years in the finals, and 4 out of the last 5 have won. I forgot what the numbers are, but admittedly, I am a Florida Panthers season ticket holder.
Okay.
So
hockey is very popular. Like being in the Middle Tennessee region, like I would probably argue the fandom in Middle Tennessee is more of a Predators fandom than a Titans fandom. They really sell out and go all out for Predators games. So hockey in the non-northern states really is popularized, and success has certainly helped. Like, Neil said, with the Panthers and the Lightning being so successful, but the Predators, you go to a game and it's Predators jerseys all up and down Bridgestone Arena. You go to a Titans game, it's usually a little emptier, and it's also a little bit more visitor friendly than a normal home game should be in the National Football League.
Now, my mother always told me, don't answer a question with a question, but let me ask you a question. Why do you think that is, just out of curiosity? I have my theory, and I have some numbers to back up my theory, but I do have a theory.
So why hockey might be more popular?
Yeah, why hockey specifically?
I think it was a new thing. It was fresh and it was new. The NFL had existed, and they had their teams like Atlanta and teams around the area. We're pretty much halfway in between Cincinnati, Atlanta. So it's like there's a lot of fandom. Major League Baseball is a prime example with the Reds and Braves. I think the Predators were kind of like, this is our thing. Right. Whereas the Titans were the Oilers, and then they played in Houston for a season, or they played in Memphis for a season. And I think that the sentiment has always been like the Predators, like the way, and I haven't been in Middle Tennessee for that long, only a few years. I'm originally from Ohio, but I just feel like the fan base, they both have like generational fan bases now. Like they've been around for 25 plus years. So now there's like a generation of people growing up But a lot of our population are people that have moved from California, from other states.
Right.
And yeah, there are teams in California in the NHL, but nothing really like substantial unless you grew up in like Southern California. And I just feel like people that grew up here are starting to really get behind it. Like I listen to sports talk radio when I go in and out of work. And, I think that there are probably more educated fans than people expect when you're talking about a non-traditional sport in a non-traditional market. But I just think people really gravitate towards it because it's theirs. They feel like it's theirs from the beginning. They didn't have to share it with anybody. They didn't have to, get a team that moved here or whatever. And I think that's been sort of the galvanizing aspect of things, maybe for Middle Tennessee fans.
I have a little bit of a different slant on that. Craig, that was good, by the way. It's a great response and a great answer. And I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said. There's no question. But here's what I think's going on. I think number one is that I find that fandom in particular, and we've done this analysis, but fandom starts with participation. The NHL has done a tremendous job at the grassroots level of generating new fans by creating new participants. They have been able to steer a number of young people away from football, tackle football, because let's face it, moms don't want their children playing tackle football because of the head injury problem. And I'm not gonna quote statistics again, not a doctor, but I have two grandchildren. One's 11, one's 7. I'm sorry, Zach. And I remember sitting in an event one time, and the head of community relations for the NFL was giving a speech and all that. I said, I raised my hand. I stood up. I said, "Let me ask you a question. I have 2 grandchildren. What could I tell my daughter that would allow her to think that her kids should be playing tackle football? Because she has already said there is no possible way my children are playing tackle football." You know what? I don't disagree with her, but they would love to play hockey. There's just not the same incidence of head injuries. I think the idea of skating, the skill of skating that goes along with hockey. And I think that, again, where does fandom start? Fandom starts at the grassroots level. So it starts with participation. Look, we're not talking about the Green Bay Packers here that had a franchise there since 1929 or something like that. We're talking about Nashville. We're talking about Fort Lauderdale. We're talking about Tampa Bay. These are markets that have had to kind of use the grassroots growth system. And NHL has done a really good job at the grassroots level. The Panthers have this new thing where they will literally pay a kid, to learn to play hockey. They'll get him the equipment. They'll get him, they'll pay for a year of ice time. They'll pay for all the things they need to teach him how to skate and play hockey. Guess what that kid becomes after that first year, or maybe even half of them, they become hockey fans. Mom, Dad, I want to go to a hockey game.
Yeah. Well, and you can probably correlate that with the boom that USA has seen success in hockey, where they're a lot more competitive with Canada.
Yes.
We have people like Austin Matthews that are from Arizona that are becoming all-time great goal scorers in American history. And a lot of that, like you said, is a testament to growing the game in non-traditional markets. And that's why they were so adamant about keeping Arizona as a team up until the bitter end. And
it just didn't work.
It just didn't work. And it's possible that maybe in the future it could. Or Houston is another option.
Actually,
Atlanta.
It's funny that you say that. A couple of years ago, we did a case study at the Sports Marketing Association, their annual event. And the case was where to move a failing hockey franchise. And, of course, the failing franchise we were talking about were the Phoenix Coyotes. So we basically did a whole case analysis. We looked at the past. We looked at the present. We looked at the future. Guess what? The first place, you already mentioned it, where we decided would be the best place for them to move was actually Houston. Second was Indianapolis. Third was Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City does not have, or the Utah area, does not have a high propensity for sports fans. They do have, obviously, basketball, but They don't support their college football teams all that well. It's never been a college area. I would be very curious to see how the Mammoth does. I hate that name. Long term. If it's not a situation where they end up moving it again.
Why do you think Utah though is so hot right now for Major League Baseball expansion, aside from just the proximity to the area, to Seattle, to other, Western Division teams? But why is Salt Lake City such a hot commodity in the Major League Baseball talks?
Yeah. I do think that teams recognize the economic impact that these professional teams have, but also in some cases don't realize the investment they're going to have to make. I mean, I think the Washington Commanders just closed a deal, I want to say, for a $3.2 billion stadium, for the Commanders to play. Mm-hmm. It's not chump change. And it took them a long time in order to be able to get that money. I was watching the Thursday night football game, and the Bills are moving to a brand new stadium. And the announcer said they paid $222 million to build the Highmark Stadium where they're playing now. And the new stadium is going to cost $2.7 billion.
Yeah.
So,
and it's open air. It's not even a dome.
I know. And and somebody says they're going to at least have like the heated seats, like they have at Tottenham Stadium in the UK. Look, I personally don't believe that Utah is necessarily the best place to put. Look, but again, I am also one that thinks that baseball, obviously in Vegas, I did believe football would work. I did believe hockey would work indoors, obviously.
Right.
But I don't know. And even professional basketball, just not sure how baseball is going to work in Vegas.
Yeah. Those sports are more exciting. There's a little bit more action and pace. Baseball, while it's gotten quicker over the years because of the pitch clock, is not conducive to like get in and get out and feel excited, like there was a lot of entertainment. Obviously Nashville is an area that is just yearning for a baseball franchise. Now, obviously we're building Nissan Stadium, right next door to Nissan Stadium. And that's going to be so a $2.1 billion stadium, the most money ever.
Who paid for that?
Well, the public mostly. The most public dollars ever spent on a pro franchise stadium is going into that. And that stadium, the irony of it all is the Titans will play there. Tennessee State University will play there. But that stadium was built with a dome on it, and the idea of having Taylor Swift concerts and Garth Brooks concerts, no concerts being rained out or lightninged out because of weather. And that's the big reason why this dome happened. More football is an afterthought for the new Nissan Stadium in 2027. It's college football playoffs. It's college football, neutral site games. It's wrestling. It's
all about economic impact. It's all about because people don't think. I mean, when you host a big event, how many people are coming into your city, and how many hotel nights are they filling up? Right. How many restaurant meals are being served? People really don't think of the bigger picture. Now, again, some markets have not been able to support the bigger picture as well. It does sound like Nashville is ready to support the bigger picture. Just like you said, wrestling.
And they do that on a daily basis with Broadway and all the tourism that comes through there. Now, I really don't know if I want to experience a WrestleMania in downtown Nashville, because that will be a complete and utter zoo, more so than it already is. But just like you said, the economic impact is just so great. There was they were trying desperately to get the World Cup when, the World Cup's coming to America. They wanted it in Nashville. They didn't get it. It's a lot of infrastructure issues because of all the growth, but then also all the things that are coming in and being able to come in because of new Nissan Stadium. It's just going to be a year-round party in Nashville, like it already has as it is now. So
I don't think Nashville has a problem with partying, as I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's not my scene anymore, but I always appreciate a visit to downtown, just the honky tonk. But it is when you're bringing in, like with the Chiefs or somebody, you get a lot of Chiefs fans that come to Nashville. A lot of people come here for their vacations, so they go down Broadway, and it's a zoo on a Friday, Saturday night, the Sunday before a game. I can only imagine week-long events with WrestleMania, college football playoffs,
Sure,
other events that, are just destined to come because there's a controlled dome stadium.
and you're not even talking about really the events that really produce a lot of revenue for the cities, and those are like the tournaments, high school tournaments, travel league tournaments. They bring in 100, 200 teams for volleyball tournament,
Right.
high school kids and all that. Now you're talking about really generating some serious revenue. There's one of the reasons why most cities, they have the convention and visitors bureaus, but as a spinoff, they have their sports commission.
Yep.
And the sports commission, and I know that Nashville does have one,
Yep.
And they're there to draw in events.
Yeah.
And there's no question that, a lot of those cities are better suited and do a better job. No question.
Neil, you've been very kind with your time. I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
You've talked about sports betting, and
Yes.
Craig and I aren't big bettors by any means. We're stumped by one thing, and I think the easy answer. I don't want to answer my own question for you,
and I won't give you the easy answer. I promise.
Well, I'm sure it's money, obviously, but what troubles me is obviously sports wants the revenue. So betting becomes this revenue source. Yes. But then on the other hand, sports is almost making a double standard because they're like, hey, players, if you ever sniff this gambling, you're out. And, I think Calvin Ridley, he was out for a year because he
Fresno State just suspended 3 basketball players, I want to say, maybe, or football players for gambling on their own team. That is an absolute no-no.
Yeah.
Right.
But they did it anyway.
But there are some teams, like the Calvin Ridley thing, he didn't bet on his own team.
Right.
He just bet on another football game.
Right.
And I guess the thing is, if there's revenue, go get it, because that's how business works. I get that.
Right.
But, man, I got a feeling that we're just opening the door for a Black Sox scandal again or something that's really going to make sports look bad.
Yes. Okay. This could be this in itself could be a whole show talking about sports gambling. Look, sports gambling is growing at phenomenal levels. Currently, there are 29 states that allow online sports gambling to occur in those states. There are still 2 giant states that do not allow it, which are Texas and California. Now, when Texas and California allow it, it's going to be it's going to be huge. It's going to be big. It's going to not that it's not big now, because it is big and it's growing every year. But here's a couple of things that I know. Number one is that approximately 4% of all sports gambling is done by underage gamblers. So we're talking kids under the age of 21. So if you're talking about 1 million people, and I'm just rounding that number, it's a lot bigger, more like 30 million. But if you're talking about 1 million people, 5% of them, 50,000, are betting on sports. Those are kids, basically. Children, your kids. I would say my kids. My kids are 39 years old at this point. They can do what they want with their money. But my point is that we're creating an interesting culture. And I think it's going to, in the long run, become a problem. The other big thing I have a real issue with are the leagues and teams basically endorsing sports gambling,
right.
And doing all sorts of deals with these sports gambling companies, because eventually the credibility is going to come into question. There's going to be a call one day in the Super Bowl that's going to be there was a couple of years ago with that pass interference call, or I forgot exactly what happened, but again, there's going to be a big scandal in sports. And whether it's in college football, whether it's in professional, whether it's at the NCAA, it just has to happen, because the lure of money is I hate to say it, is just too great.
Well, and we might be seeing it in baseball with the Cleveland Guardians having 2 pitchers that were suspended under suspicion of weird betting on prop bets and just really extremely high volumes of bets that came in at weird times, essentially right before first pitches, things like that, and there were a lot of, you go on X and you see a lot of the videos like, hey, this is Emmanuel Clase, a great closer for the Cleveland Guardians, who was nearly untouchable in 2024, coming out and spiking pitches in the dirt, to start off an at bat or whatever it may be. And we're seeing so many of these like micro transactional bets, like prop bets you see in the Super Bowl, but now you're seeing it for Major League Baseball, where first pitch strikes or, will this guy get down in the count 2-1? So do you feel like that can be policed a little bit more and you might take away some of those issues that grow into a mountain of problems for Major League Baseball and other sports?
Well, I think the first place you're going to see it grow into a mountain of problems is going to be colleges. And I'll tell you why. Number one is that, we all know about NIL, name, image, and likeness. Players can now get paid, I use air quotes here, but I'd look stupid. For their using their name, image, and likeness. So athletes are getting paid incredible amounts of money. Let's face it, they're not getting paid anymore for name, image. They're just getting paid. And unfortunately, what we're creating is a situation with haves and have-nots. So what happens now when that second string, let's say right tackle for the University of Texas, and I'm sorry to use them as an example because that may be a bad example, but what happens though when he sees, the first string guy getting $50,000 in NIL money from the University of Texas, for let's say making an appearance at a local wing joint or a barbecue place, whatever, and he's getting like nothing or next to nothing. And all of a sudden a gambler comes up to him and says, hey, if you get into the game or whatever, or, they're going to do something. It's just going to happen. It's going to happen, and it really, it just really creates a situation. It's going to create doubt. And I hate to say it, there's so much doubt that goes on anyway in our society right now. Everybody doubts everything, conspiracy theories and, and everything else. I just think that sports was one of those areas that I wish, had kind of kept it inside the guardrails, if you know what I mean.
Well, and even looking at smaller colleges, what's to say a player in the Mid-American Conference is looking for an extra money, and then they're susceptible to these, these people that are saying, hey, go out there. And, the University of Toledo, not to try to knock on my college's old arch rival. I'm a Bowling Green Falcon, so I can kind of say this, but University of Toledo had a point shaving scandal in basketball several years ago. And I think that it's just so difficult to separate these two. And like you said, Neil, the guardrails probably needed to be up. And unfortunately, the guardrails have been crumpled up into a plastic trash can and thrown out into the ocean because they are no longer there, and anything is on the table now. And that's the sad thing, because we love sports because of the spontaneity that comes with it. You watch the 11 o'clock game between Boise State and Wyoming because you just never know what you're going to see in that game. You could see something you've never seen in college football before.
You're right.
And now it's like you just don't know. You don't know what you're seeing is the reality of what it really is, or could be, or should be.
Look, the sad thing is the NCAA was charged with really being, I don't want to use the word police, but they were charged with setting the guardrails, paving the road. Guess what they didn't do? They didn't pave the road. Not only did they not pave the road, they took the guardrails off.
Yeah.
And basically, it does not surprise me that Congress wants to now get involved with this, because the NCAA just, I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this show or not, but F this NIL situation up so bad that now Congress wants to get involved. And when Congress wants to get involved, you are really in trouble. And they really are.
Or they need a distraction.
Or something.
But you're right, though. That's true.
Neil, we could talk all night about this because the sports business, Craig and I are sports fans, but we find ourselves talking about the behind the scenes a lot. And geez, let's have you on soon, because Craig and I have talked about ESPN streaming. There's a million other things we can talk about in terms of this business stuff. I see, and as a Steelers fan, I'm getting excited about this. The Dolphins are actually in this game. I know you want to watch the end of it. Buffalo
just scored again.
Oh man, I jinxed it.
They did score. The Dolphins did score another touchdown. So I will say they were keeping it close. Look, it's 27-21. So it's a close game. It's not,
Okay,
as many people would care to listen, they're covering right now, right?
So right now they are.
There's a lot of people that are interested in this score.
There's a lot of topics though that we really can cover. One of my favorite topics in sports is like sports philanthropy and how giving sports fans are, because they are. And how they and there's a number of other sports travel. Sports fans love to travel. They love to support their teams. They love to support their kids when they're playing in tournaments. They really, and that's a big, it was estimated that sports travel accounts for about $30 billion of revenue in this country. And that includes people who travel to support their favorite team, people that travel to support their families when they play in a tournament, and then people that just travel to go fishing or go skiing or, play pickleball in a tournament or something like that. Oh, that's a whole other topic for another day. The pickleball, pickleball discussion.
Yeah. Lots of reasons to have you.
Yeah.
Well, Neil, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, I'd like to.
I'll send you a copy of this when we put it out. Hopefully
we'll
next
definitely. We'll definitely post. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So sounds good. Well, Neil,
Can I get a little bit of a shameless plug in for my company, SBR Net? Would this be an appropriate time to do that? Yeah, so look, SBR Net is a great place for data focused on the business of sports. Follow us on social media, Instagram at SBR Net Data. We're on LinkedIn at SBR Net. I don't use X and Twitter that much anymore because I really don't understand what it's supposed to be at this point.
Right.
But again, if you just want to find out, what we do, how we do it, or you have some interest in even, in this part of the business, just go to my website, sbrnet.com, and, just kind of cruise around. You can't break the site. So, just I appreciate your having me on, Chris and Craig. I know, it's late for me. It's 10:44, but I could talk about sports.
Well, you got the Dolphins. You've got the Dolphins are covering, and they might come back. You never know.
Hey, we didn't even talk about golf yet, or tennis, or we didn't talk about what's going on with soccer, auto racing. Dude, I got stuff to say on all these things.
You keep talking. We're going to give you your own podcast on this.
I have my own. But mine's called My First Job in Sports. It's focused on helping college students learn what it takes to get a job in the business of sports by talking to those people who already have a job in sports.
Great.
So that's kind of my calling there. So guys, thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil, so much. And check all that stuff out. Neil, have a great day. Well, Neil Schwartz there from SBR Net. Fascinating stuff.
Wealth of information. Loved having Neil on.
Yeah. I mean, there's
I watched the first minute and a half there. I was sad. He was a great guest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, very good. And like I said, I felt bad. Neil was first thinking we were doing this at 10 a.m. I said, no, Neil. I said, we don't. We have to do it late at night with family.
This is a really late show. We have to do it at night, right?
Yeah, but no, and Neil was kind. I mean, he said it's late for him, and he's a big Dolphins fan, and the Dolphins are somehow staying in this game against the Bills.
They are, yeah.
So I want to make sure Neil can watch the last 7 minutes of the game, and hey, as a Steelers fan, go Dolphins. Hopefully they can pull off the other one. We'll see. Craig, we got a lot to talk about. I want to be mindful of your time, so maybe we could do some real quick hits on some of the stuff we normally talk about.
Sure.
Let's see. I kind of like doing this last week. Who do you think the best team in the AFC is after 2 weeks?
I think I'm going to go with the Bills still. I know they're having a dogfight right now, although that's a weird Thursday night football game, albeit at home. But I still think the Bills are maybe the most complete team in the AFC right now. It's kind of a toss up right now. You're still early in the season, but I kind of like what they've done. I really like the Chargers. I liked them before the season. I thought that they could knock Kansas City off the perch there. I thought Kansas City showed a little weakness, in the playoffs last year, especially in the Super Bowl, getting, knocked around by Philadelphia. And I think the Chargers, it might be their time to at least win a division and maybe knock Kansas City into the wild card. And then Kansas City would have to, do a little bit more than they normally have to do and go on the road maybe, or, at least play an extra game or two in the playoffs, unlike in years past. But I like the Bills and I like the Chargers right now quite a bit.
Yeah, I would say Bills too. I think the Ravens are up there. I still am not convinced about the Ravens in the playoffs. I'm looking at the NFC. I still think we're looking at the Packers, but there's a lot of teams that have kind of bridged the gap. I think the Lions, they're back. They looked good last week against the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is going to be a sneakily good game. We got the Rams at Philadelphia this weekend.
Yeah,
that's kind of intriguing. They're both 2-0.
Got a chance to watch the Rams last week against my second team, the Titans. It was sort of a sleepwalk at the beginning of the game. They had a first half where they looked very human against the Titans, but kind of imposed their will in the second half. And I think the Rams will go as far as Matthew Stafford's healthy. If Stafford's healthy throughout the season, there's no reason to expect the Rams are not going to be a contender in the NFC.
Yeah, so I would say the answer to the question I put out for me, you're probably looking at Bills in the AFC, Packers in NFC.
Yeah.
There are a couple teams I think are still the top tier. Everybody else is below them. But I think that tier is kind of tightening up. I mean, I look at teams like the Lions, the Ravens, teams like that could definitely give them a run. But right now, I still think Bills and Packers, but that could easily change next week.
Yeah.
Well,
now
Packers,
the Eagles are still there,
yeah.
And I mean, obviously they're probably not going to do it in like the sexiest way, but they're just consistently good, and I think they're going to be there once again at the end of the season. And they just are kind of a well-oiled machine right now.
I don't mean this to be rude. I think the Browns are the Browns. The talent isn't there. I really think, and I think we've talked about this before, in my opinion, for the Browns, it's not going to be as much about wins and losses. I think they had a pretty good draft class. Just continue to develop the draft class. I really like, and again, I like the Steelers. So I shouldn't say I really like anybody from the Browns, but Harold Fannin, I know he's your guy at Bowling Green.
Yep.
Lots of good things being said by him. Quinshon Judkins, I don't think he's getting suspended now because he's bad.
Yeah.
They put him at number 1. 10 carries for 61 yards. And again, that's not super amazing, but considering he lost all that time with the allegations against him,
right.
That was really good. Because usually when a guy loses all that time, you're like, oh, we got to wait a couple weeks before we bring him back. No, the Browns brought him right back, and he was good. So, again, the Ravens are on an entirely different level than the Browns. I think the big takeaway I have about the Browns is maybe not week 3, but they really need to sit there and say, Joe Flacco's okay. He's not good. He's not bad. But you got to really come out this year saying, hey, one of these two guys we drafted could be a franchise quarterback, or we really need to look elsewhere. And,
yeah, they do.
Yeah, and again, maybe week 3 is not the time to do it, but it's got to be sooner rather than later, in my opinion.
Well, they've got the Packers at home, and then they're at Detroit, and then they have a home game against the Vikings, and then a road game against Pittsburgh before they get this weird Dolphins team after that. So, I don't know if there's ever a good time. Sometimes people will say the bye week or after the bye week is a good time to plug one of those younger quarterbacks in, but I think the only reason why they wouldn't do it so soon is because Kevin Stefanski may be thinking he's coaching for his job. And if he is in charge of making that decision, he probably wants to give himself the best chance to win. And I don't think you go into a game against the Green Bay Packers, even at home, thinking, let's start a young quarterback against that ferocious pass rush. So, sooner or later, they have to play Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders to see what they have with both of them. Because if things go south, the Browns are going to be picking pretty high in the draft, and they're going to have Jacksonville's first-round pick, to where if they need ammunition for a quarterback at the top of the draft, they'll have it unless they have the pick themselves. So I think you really need to come away with this 2025 season knowing what you have at quarterback moving forward, because it's not Joe Flacco. He's too old to be your guy. he's barely a transitional quarterback at this point. He's basically just a veteran guy you hope you find some magic, because you had some magic with him a couple of years ago when he came off the street and started just throwing touchdowns after touchdowns, even though he did throw a lot of interceptions as well. But I think at this point you have no choice but to maybe ride it out for a couple more games with Flacco, but maybe come time against that home game against the Dolphins, maybe you make a switch, to where it's a little bit, easier. You don't want to go to Pittsburgh and be like, yeah, we're going to throw a young quarterback in to the Wolves on the road. But at some point you're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off if you're Cleveland. And I think the sooner the better, because you really want to see what these quarterbacks have to offer.
If the Steelers defense doesn't improve soon, you might want to throw a rookie quarterback because he might get 100 touchdowns against the Steelers. I don't know what's going on with the Steelers defense.
Yeah, disappointing, man.
They just laid an awful egg. And, Tomlin, good coach. He's got a lot more good qualities than bad qualities, but one of his bad qualities is he'll have a game or two where the whole team just sucks. And they sucked on Sunday. No excuses or anything. And they're getting a little bit banged up on the defense. Joey Porter Jr. was out against Seattle. That didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And they're older. I mean, I like Jalen Ramsey. I think Jalen Ramsey's a lot better safety right now. Without Porter, they tried to put him on a couple of the Seahawks fast receivers, and he got burned a few times. So, let's see. Rodgers didn't look good, but I think part of the problem is, again, he had no time to throw. And again, I'm not blindly embracing Rodgers. It's just more of, if you're 20 or 40, you got to have time to throw. And if they don't give you time to throw, you're not going to be at the best you are. So,
it was based off of that first week, you got a little excited about the Steelers. And sometimes, I think we need to keep in mind that the Seahawks, not a bad team. They got beaten week 1 to the 40, by the 49ers, a team that's 2-0 right now. So, maybe it's just that the team they played was a pretty good team. It's possible.
Yeah.
And obviously the defense has some work to do. And I think that this week's game, at New England will be, a good test to see kind of like, was that first week fool's gold, or are they going to kind of keep, get back on track and steamroll a team that might not be great right now in New England?
They're definitely not in the top tier of the NFL, but some optimistic people were saying they could be like 10-7 or 11-6. If you want to be that, and again, I'm with you. The Seahawks aren't as bad as people think, but you can't have losses to the Patriots and Seahawks if you're thinking you're going to be 11-6 or 10-7.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's going to be much tougher games coming up.
There will,
Now, Joe Burrow being out for the Bengals, I wouldn't sleep on Jake Browning. He's definitely not Joe Burrow, but right. I think, he's been through the whole thing last year, and he may not be terrible because the Bengals still have good receivers. So, it's hard to say. It just was a gross week of football. I did not like that at all. Trying to think, like your Titans lost, Lions, I think are back with a huge win over the
Bears. It was quite an embarrassing loss for the Bears. I thought the Bears were better than that, honestly, and maybe it was just like the Lions were upset about that week 1 showing in Green Bay. But wow, that was a total clinic against the Bears, and I thought the Bears were a little bit better than that. And maybe they're not. Maybe the Lions are back, and I kind of feel like they're. The Lions are still good. I don't know if they're great, but I think they had something to prove in that game, and they went out and proved it at least. But disappointing in Chicago, though. I'm not sure about Caleb Williams now. The more you see him, the more you're just kind of like, well, yeah, it's his first year in Ben Johnson's offense, but I don't know. I don't know if I see it with him right now. I don't know if I see that potential there.
I'm not ragging on Ben Johnson. I think he's fine.
Yeah.
I think Chicago getting him is a good move. But there is so much freaking hype about Ben Johnson.
And there was.
I think there were some people thinking, ooh, the Bears could win the division this year. Since
there were people that were picking the Bears as a – no, it's still early, so who knows, but obviously the Bears are already 0-2 in the division, so they're already kind of digging themselves quite the hole. But, there's a lot of work to do. And I think that, Ben Johnson can be a great coach. He's a great offensive mind, but I think the Lions kind of proved that they're still the well-oiled machine that they were with Ben Johnson. And I think that's part of what they wanted to do, was prove that they could still do it, because a lot of people thought Lions lost their coordinators, they're going to be in trouble, or at least the offense is going to be in trouble because Goff doesn't have Ben Johnson anymore. Well, they at least proved against Chicago that they can go back out and steamroll some teams. So we'll see what happens. They have the Ravens coming up on Monday Night Football, so it doesn't get any easier. Hence, this is the NFL, right? It doesn't get any easier in the National Football League, but that'll be a pretty interesting game to see the Lions and Ravens going at it on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, and people need to calm down on Ben Johnson. I mean, again, good guy for Chicago. If Caleb Williams is going to develop, I think Ben Johnson's a good person to get him there. But again, the expectations way out of whack. It wasn't even funny. That seemed to be most of the big stuff happening in the NFL. College football, Ohio U is not a bad football team.
No.
Yeah, Ohio State kind of played around from in the first half. They kind of pulled away in the second half. But again, Ohio U's got nothing to be embarrassed about. I was even hearing some talk saying, with all the moving around in football, could Ohio U eventually be a Big 12 team? I don't think that's out of the question. So, but who knows? But I thought Ohio U looked good for himself. I think Ohio State. I was writing at the TV studio, but I was kind of doing some coverage of the Ryan Day press conference, and they were kind of sticking it to him a little bit about some of the first half possessions that kind of faltered in the red zone. But I thought overall Ohio State was okay. It wasn't a stunning, blow you away performance, but they did what they had to do. They're off this week, but next week they go to Washington. It'd be interesting to see what the first road game would be for those guys.
Yeah, in Washington's not an easy environment to go in there and win, but I think you've already got the battle-tested Julian Sayin off of the Texas game, and I think he's going to continue to develop. He might have one of those games, and sometimes Ohio State has a game like that every year where they play down to competition, like Purdue's of the world and things like that, where sometimes they get upset, sometimes they play a lot closer than they should. But at the end of the day, I think, Ohio State has probably put themselves into a situation where they might win 10 or 11 games for sure. After that Texas win, they'll be a playoff team. And I think by then, Julian Sayin's going to have a lot of football under his belt and a lot of high leverage football under his belt. So there's nothing to really show. There's nothing that's showing me that Ohio State won't still be Ohio State come Big Ten championship season, college football playoff season. I think Ohio State's going to be right in the thick of all of that. And I think that they're as good of a shot of winning than anybody because they have depth, they have elite talent, and they have great coaching.
Yeah, definitely. The only other thing that really stuck out to me about college football this week, it's going to be a really wild matchup. Illinois goes to Indiana, and you're like, what? Football? Illinois is 9th in the country. Indiana's I think 18th or 19th. It's going to be a pretty good top 20 matchup. I'm kind of looking forward to that one.
I like these weird, quirky matchups, isn't it fun every now and then you get one of those, it could be the first Big Ten game or, whatever, but you just get some of these really interesting, looks like they're both kind of evenly matched teams. And that's kind of the beauty of college football, because you can have from week to week just a blowout level game. And then the next week you're playing, a team that, like Michigan's playing at Nebraska, for instance. Just an interesting Big Ten game, I like those kinds of matchups. Indiana, Illinois is another just example of that. So I'm kind of always intrigued by those kinds of teams matching up with each other, even if it is a conference game that you kind of expect them to play each other.
It should be pretty tight. The game is at Indiana, but I'm wondering if Illinois ends up pulling out that game. We've talked about how Illinois could be a really big test for Ohio State.
They will.
Be a top 5 matchup. If
Illinois, I think that's a road game, isn't it? Is that at Illinois?
Yeah, Illinois, yeah.
Yeah.
And that it could be a top 5 matchup. I mean, Ohio State could end up with like 4 of them by the time of the
Well,
year.
yeah, and the beauty that and maybe I'm kind of sad because I grew up a Wisconsin fan. Brett Bielema, the head coach there at Illinois, has really revitalized that program, and I'm not surprised by it because he did great things at Wisconsin. But they have a very good veteran quarterback that's been around, played a lot of football, Luke Altmaier. They're a good football team. And, I know that Duke maybe still is building, but they did get Darian Mensah in the transfer portal from Tulane, making him one of the highest paid quarterbacks of all time in the NIL era. And Illinois just went in there and smoked them and made it look like it was not a top 25 caliber matchup. And, Illinois has got a good team. And I think that Bielema he's not going to back away from big games like Ohio State or Penn State. Like, he's going to go in there thinking and expecting to win, and having a home game against a young quarterback like Julian Sayin. Maybe that's the kind of game that Sayin stumbles in, in his ascent to stardom as a Big Ten quarterback.
Yeah, it should be majorly fascinating. Well, we're kind of blowing through all this. Craig, there's something I need to talk to you about afterwards that we definitely don't need to talk about in the podcast for a variety of reasons. But the paper, you watched episode 3 of the paper.
Yes.
Guy Vogel and I broke it down. Guy is analyzing each scene, and I don't think we need to do that tonight.
No.
I had a thought, and if I'm missing something you want to talk about, please let me know.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
I guess if we could boil this down to one topic, in my opinion, let's talk about that. If you have something else to throw in, by all means, feel free.
Okay, go ahead.
It's interesting. We had the classic, hey, newspapers and publications, TV stations, radio stations don't pay that much. So you have great journalists, but, sometimes you get to the point where you're like, man, I don't want to work every, late night, or man.
Right.
And the thing that is funny sometimes is you've got like in this show, Mari, the probably the most veteran reporter there, she's going to be she got offered to be in concierge at the Radisson. And you might be like, that probably doesn't pay that much. Well, it definitely probably pay more than she makes at, this truth teller. And might pay more than she make at other big papers in the area.
Who knows?
I'm wondering, Craig, and again, this gets into some journalism issues I definitely don't want to touch on tonight, of crazy stuff happening right now in our country. I don't know how you fix it, because I think there's a lot of discussion out there saying, well, why can't, these publications pay journalists more? Well, it is what it is. They're not going to double everyone's salary tomorrow or anything.
Right.
I kind of wonder, even in my own life, where you might sit there and if you're like, hey, I don't know if I want to do this that much anymore. I wish sometimes, if you're a great journalist, if somebody can sit there and say, look, we understand you've got to go somewhere else. We understand you might want to have better hours or better pay. Can we keep you around as a part-time journalist? Now, that kind of flies in the face, because I know for some of the bigger publications are like, oh, we need this person around for 40 hours. But I think the industry is losing a lot of people because of the pay and everything. And if they can't pay people, how do they sit there and say, hey, you like journalism, and if they want to stay around, how can they do side projects and other stuff like that? I don't know. I've been thinking about that. I guess that's what struck me about that show. Yeah. And again, it turned out Mari and Ned had a great experience uncovering the story. Mari's and she stays with them. But, Mari could have left easily.
Right.
A lot of people are leaving places each day. And it's like, I wish as an industry we could get more creative to kind of keep some of our stars. And I think right now we're not being creative. And because of that, we're losing people that we don't want to lose.
Yeah. This episode was, it actually was the exact opposite for me. The way I felt about the first 2 episodes, which I did not really laugh a lot at, although I certainly appreciated the journalistic realism that you and I have experienced over our years in the business. This episode for me was more of a laugh out loud experience versus the realism of journalism, which is I think it was very disingenuous and it was very unjournalistic like to go into this mattress store posing as a couple as opposed to actually saying, I am a journalist. That is what we are taught, is to introduce yourself as who you are and leave no way for any stone to be unturned that you did not know that you were a journalist. But that, again, given the realism they've had in the first 2 episodes, I was okay with it because it was funny. There was a lot of funny gags between the 2 main characters. As there's a budding romance between them, I think, that will eventually come to fruition, and you can tell that Ned is sort of a little gangly when it comes to her because he likes her, but he's also her boss, so it's kind of a weird situation. But the episode really pulls together well for me at the end when they do uncover that story, and the spark that she had from that story makes her want to stay. It makes her want to continue because she believes the process now. I think with the Toledo Truth Teller, she believes in maybe the not 95 or even 85% viability of the paper's future, but I think she's starting to understand this is why she did this in the beginning. This is why she wants to be a journalist and wants to remain a journalist, because she can uncover truth. And that's, one of the biggest selling points, I think, to all journalists, is being able to uncover truth, inform the public, and be that connective tissue from the public to people in power and people in power to the public. And I think that this episode ends on a great note that's really showing her, like, she didn't stay because she likes Ned, or she didn't, there wasn't some contrived plot device that makes her stay. It was the fact that she felt the spark and the adrenaline of good journalism again. And that's what I think we all can relate to when we see her. When you might have a day where you're like, man, I don't want to be in this industry anymore. And then you have a day like she had, where you uncover a great story, or you write a great story, or you're content with a story that you wrote. And it just makes you kind of fall in love with the business all over again.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. And again, I still feel the same way about the show. I laugh more, I agree with you, in episode 3 than the first 2 episodes. But I'm finding, although I enjoy the humor of the show and everything, man, I am thinking a lot about journalism. Man, it's not a bad thing. Yeah. I think it's actually pretty good. So,
well, and I appreciate the show. I think the show really does have its heart in the right place for the industry. Like, you and I talked about this when we first started seeing trailers, and just, knowing that there was a paper coming to Peacock. We were skeptical. We were scared that it was going to just badmouth the industry or be anti-journalism or whatever. I think its heart's in the right place. I think you can tell that this show loves journalism, and it really wants to be a champion for journalism. And I can't fault it for that. Maybe it's not as funny as I was expecting it to be, but I think episode 3 started to put some more laughs out there for me, in addition to some of the, scathing realities that the journalism industry has. But this series really hits home for journalists. Now, I don't know if it hits home for people that aren't journalists. Maybe they can just relate in their job to some of the things that they're facing with an uncertain future, and or just cuts and budget issues and things like that. But as a journalist, I feel like it's a lot better than I really expected it to be, from the perspective of caring about the industry of journalism.
I was excited. Paul and Joe, my friends I do the podcast with on Tuesday, they're not journalists, and I intentionally didn't bring it up because I figured we talk about a lot on some of the other shows I do. And no, they brought it up, and they were both down. And one's a teacher, one's a pastor, and they were like, yeah, we're in. So
yeah, I mean, I can see why it would have. At first I thought, well, maybe it's too niche. Like, it's a journalism story. Like, do people that are not in journalism really care about it? But I think people can relate to the workplace comedy, but then also just the aspect of, yeah, we're not journalists, but we feel the sting of budget cuts. We feel the sting of having to share office space, or, not feeling maybe like the industry is in a good spot, whatever your industry may be. So I think people, there's relatability that goes beyond journalism. Obviously, for you and I being journalists, I think we can appreciate it on a little bit deeper level because of that, because it is so interesting and depicting the industry. And I think depicting it pretty well to a large degree. I mean, some things work, some things don't, some things are on the nose, some things are a little bit more subtle, but overall it just works pretty well. And I think that I told you I was skeptical after the first 2 episodes. I wasn't really feeling it so much, but I think after episode 3, I got the laughs, I got the journalism realities and the situational comedy that comes with that. And I think it put together a pretty good episode there to kind of get me back into it and dare I say, hooked a little bit now, to where I'll probably, binge watch it or something like that when I have a chance to do so.
Fantastic. Well, Craig, let's do this. I don't want to keep you too late. I do want to talk to you about some journalism issues that are coming up that I definitely don't want to talk about here on this show. So let's end this early, but thank you. Neil Schwartz did great. And again, we probably fit in what should have been a 4-hour show into hours. But this is good. This is good. I mean, it's better than doing a 4-hour show and having 15 minutes of content. There was a lot of good stuff with that. Yeah. So if you haven't already, again, like, subscribe. And for Craig, this is Chris. Thanks for checking us out. Have a great day.